Uh-oh.
Okay, so we're going to work on, today we're going to be tying the smaller version, the size 4 of the Smoken mirrors. And this is a pattern I've been working on for about 10 seasons with a simple goal of creating a wide profile that still casts and sinks fast, casts light, but offers the big broad profile as you see here. It's composed of a few different things. We've got a back piece, and that's just tied on a wire shaft. Jointed, pretty standard joint with front jig hook, a couple dumbbells, and you'll see the tail and the trim is done with marabou, and the body is with UV polar chenille. I also like to use the new polar reflector flash, as well as Agavale chenille from Hairline. And then on the inside of those pec fins here, you'll see some round rubber legs, which being very buoyant hold the whole profile together, and you get a profile very similar to that when fishing the fly. Yet still casting very light. The size 4 you can use on something along the lines of a 4, 5, and 6 weight, and is an ideal fly for trout spay as it's going forward. It's one of my favorite flies to throw. I use it a lot on the Yellowstone, Missouri, Madison, and anywhere where there's sculpins, and then with a little color change you can do a crawdad colorway. Starting with the back piece, I've got a little wire shaft here, and I'm going to bend it. I want it, the total length, to be about 3/4 of an inch after I've cut it. So I'm going to bend it here, cut it down, and mash that clean, and that's what we're going to put into the vise here. So, and keep it so they're vertical, and then when you attach your thread, and I've got 240 denier here, Vivus power thread 240 is really great, flat wax nylon, very good threads. I recommend at least a 200 denier whenever tying in dumbbells, and this is a great general thread. Quick tip, and I blew right past it, but when you're attaching thread, you can do it much easier than cutting by laying it right on the shank you're looking to tie it onto, mash it with your fingertips, and begin wrapping back, and then catch it on the wire where you cut it. Try that again. Okay. So now that we've got a thread base down, with the tail skirt, it is made of marabou. However, on the inside I'll be putting a twin tail of lateral scale in, and I've got half a strip cut here, and I'm going to tie in one side on the opposite side of the hook, trim it at the same length of the shank, and tie one in on the other side here. Okay, so you'll see we've got just a twin tail going out there, and that's our basic start. From there, we're going to want to get a nice big blood quill marabou feather, as seen here. This is a color I really like, golden tan, and this color we're tying is called the Oro y Plata, which is gold and silver, and is also the state motto of Montana. And coincidentally, it also looks like the cutthroat and the whitefish, two of our native fish. So really good color to have around, especially when big browns and rainbows and whatnot are looking for the little whiteys. So you can see kind of tan trim, silver underbelly with a little orange in the gills, might even be a little cutthroat. Definitely a good morsel, and it's caught my personal biggest fish on the Big Hole, some of my biggest fish on the Yellowstone, and overall has been a really great fly for me in almost all of our rivers around here. Starting with the tail skirt here, we've got our flash tails in there, and we're actually going to tie this in reverse, but we want to make sure we've got plenty of tail when we do this. So I'm going to trim that clean. And we're going to flip it around with the butts going right over those twin tails, and we're going to roll wrap here. So using your vice hand fingertips, allow the marabou to go all the way around the hook, or around the shank here, and we're going to wrap forward. Then split it into 2 pigtails, one on the side close to you, one on the far side. Pull them back, and just start with a little thread wrap there to hold it back. You can see we've still got a gap here, and we want to have a 360-degree skirt, so we're going to manipulate this marabou a little bit farther until we can get that full 360 degrees. And one reason why we're doing this to rather than just tying the marabou in straight up, this is really going to look like a fish's tail. And what I mean by that is the actual tail of any fish is borderline transparent, and they move really fast, so naturally they're hard to see. And the spot on their body where they go from body to tail is a very defined spot, and to create that we're using the tips of the marabou feather to stick out a little bit, but we've got that under clump underneath, and it really portions nicely and really gives it a good illusion of an actual tail moving, which is going to lead to much stronger strikes, way less short strikes, a lot less refusals. And when your big trout or whatever it is you're going after comes up to it and is thinking about eating it, they're going to believe that that right there is a little baby whitey or sculpin or cutthroat or whatever it is you're going for imitation wise. We've wrapped our polar chenille forward. Pretty standard there. The difference is I could leave it untrimmed here, but we are going to trim this down, and I'm going to part it both ways, so I've got them vertical, one up, one down. This is the UV silver color, which is any angler on the Yellowstone needs to have streamers with UV polar chenille silver in it. It's a perfect whitefish matchup. It probably also has a rainbow look to it. When I'm trimming this, I'm angling it back, so I'm going to have a nice taper to it. You can see I'm trimming it down quite a bit, because this is, the tail part of the fish. Even a big thick sculpin has a really narrow back portion. Okay, so we'll trim up our extra fibers here. And the fundamental part of our fly, or of our back portion here, is ready to go. And I don't try to get all the flash little fibers out of the tail. Leave a few in there. If you got any major clumps, they can cause the marabou to act funny, so make sure to get those out of there. And what I've got here, this is UV red ice dub. A really great material from Hairline, and with proper application of super glue, it forms an indestructible weld around the finishing part of your fly. So I've got a pretty good chunk here, and I'm going to cover up this whole thread base with it. Get up here, so we've got a nice thread base covered up with UV red ice dub. Throw a quick half hitch in there behind the loop. Okay, and now we're ready for glue. Got some really good stuff, widely available, Loctite Professional Liquid here, very useful. And I'm going to put a dab on. I'm not going to cut my thread yet. You can see here I've got it up. I'm going to kind of coat that little area pretty good. Leave my tag end about 1/8 of an inch. And there's our back portion. So what's really nice about this setup is that it's very light. So it moves with almost nothing current or a strip or anything like that. It's going to keep flickering and moving, and it's not going to hold you back. It being so light, once the fly starts sinking head down, this part just goes up, and the fly sinks fast head first with the hook point up. So we've got our back piece ready to go here. Set him aside, and we're going to get ready to build our joint, starting with our size 4 60-degree jig hook. This is an owner with cutting point, something I swear by, especially in trout and light tackle. It is a heavy wire hook, round bend, and the cutting point there is really awesome. You can see it's kind of got a shovel, a couple flanges, and it doesn't take much for these guys to find a nice spot. I fish them mostly barbless, well actually personally all barbless, and I've never hooked and landed so many. This is the 4th season I've gone to using a single front jig hook in the pattern, and my catch rates, net rates, everything has really gone up. And probably most notably, I'm not maiming nearly as many, or anglers aren't maiming nearly as many little fish running a single hook fly rather than, you know, your odd 17-inch brown taking 2 size 2s to the face. We all know that's not good. So keeping the little ones in the river nice and healthy is important, and then also we all like to land our big ones, so getting that really good quality hook up front can help you a lot there. Before I do attach anything, I am going to set my dumbbells up, and you can see I've built a little thread bump here right in front of the elbow. Lay the dumbbell down, go 4 wraps one direction, 4 the other direction, followed by helicopter wraps, and then I do that kind of a series 3 or 4 times until I've really got the dumbbells locked on there. It's important to make anchor wraps here, which dumbbells can seem like they're on there well when you tie it, and once you go fish it and you jar them free, oftentimes you'll see the fly itself will fall apart. Well, not here with this setup. Adding these anchor wraps, so after I've done a series of good tight wraps here, I'm going to go right back onto the shank and make 5 or 6 wraps, and that's going to prevent any of those wraps from slipping. So even if you do deliver this fly into a rock at 60 miles an hour and you jar the eyes free, when you go to twist them back, they lock right back into place, which is really nice. So this is a streamer. If set up properly, this thing can last, you know, 30, 40 strikes, multiple days on the river. You know, obviously tangled up in trees doesn't help, but if you can keep the fly alive, it's going to keep doing really good for you. So we've got our dumbbells locked in there, and now I'm going to thread up my back portion here. I've got a little chunk of bleeding bait wire, about 1.25 inches long, and I'm going to string my back portion right onto it. And I've got a single bead here. I use the red, and the trimming the fly out in red is really good. You notice I did the UV polar or the UV ice dub in red, trimming the fly out when I finished the back portion head right here. And anytime you can add a little injury or a little wound to a streamer pattern, I think you're going to get more strikes and more confident strikes, which is really nice. When attaching your little joint here, we've got our bead strung on there, a nice bead-sized loop holding the back portion on. And I'm going to lash this on right to the side. And since we're not using a hook here on the back, we don't need to run it all the way up to the eye or do some type of strange knot formation in order to hold this back piece on. The back piece is here simply for action and to get you more strikes from bigger fish. Once we've got it attached, and you'll notice I've attached this on the side of the hook here, and because we're trying to build a wide and flat fly, and a nice size chunk of material like that wire going on there can certainly help to your profile. So now that we've got it attached, we're going to do a little tiny bucktail underskirt. Typically with bucktail you'd be using it to create a nice big lightweight bait fish pattern, and you know, lots of profile without a lot of bulk kind of thing, which is, you know, one of the main things in this fly. However, we're not looking for a real buoyant fly. We're looking for something that can sink pretty fast but still cast light. What we're going to do here, and this is just to help the overall profile, is we're going to tie in a little chunk of bucktail here, and there's not much of it at all. And this is going to be our underskirt, and we want it to get onto that hook shank, and we're going to do another 360-degree skirt with it. So using that roll wrap technique we did earlier, we're going to get a nice sparse skirt, and this is going to help keep everything together as well as help the marabou we're going to do for the overskirt stay in place. Rogue angel there, clean him up. Alright, now on to the underskirt, and you'll notice what we're doing with this marabou. This, out of the tons of ways to use marabou, this is a really cool one because you get a lot of work out of the same feather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the blood quill marabou feather and trim the tip out here. Okay, we're going to set him aside for later because we really need those. Here, now that we've got our core section done, we want to get this junk out of here, clean it up a little bit. The stuff that's all dyed up, and we've got a little uneven tips. Okay, good. So we've got those evened out, and we want that to be just a little shorter than the bucktail in total length when we create this overskirt. So we're going to trim it clean, lay it right on the hook, let it roll wrap around, Do an underskirt check. Boom, looking good. And that little part where you're rolling the materials around the hook with your vice hand fingertips will take you a little bit of getting used to, but it's really useful. And we don't have hardly any materials in this fly yet. We've got over half of it tied, and it still has virtually nothing in it as far as bulk and whatnot, so we're still looking really good there. Now that we've got our underskirt and overskirt tied, and you can see how it conceals that joint really nicely and keeps the profile going, we're going to prep our next stretch of UV polar chenille here. And we probably want about 6 inches for this. And we are going to lash it on right here on the tires side of the hook, just like we did with the wire. So just like so. And we're going to wrap forward, and now is where the rubber legs come in. And you can take a chunk. There's all kinds of round rubber legs. I highly suggest using these. They stick out better. They are more buoyant, so they hold out better in the water. And they look, in this case, they look like the spines of the pec fin, or potentially legs of a crawdad. Got the orange barred here, and I'm going to break a strand of 3 off of there. And for the size 4, I start to get the portions right. You want to do 1 3/4 wide on these guys. This one's just a skosh long. Trim him down. So now we've got the bobbin hanging just a skosh back from the dumbbell eyes. Our UV polar chenille's right here. We're going to throw an X-wrap right onto these rubber legs, not with a lot of thread pressure, just basically the bobbin. Okay. Even them out, and we're not pulling tight on this bobbin. This bobbin's just hanging there. We don't want to use the thread to tie these rubber legs on because it will cut through them over time with a tight wrap. So you can see I've got it X'd right there. And now we get to wrap our polar chenille forward. And we're using the red thread. It looks really good underneath this stuff, so if you have a few gaps, don't worry about that. That's why you use red thread. It looks like a little wound. And as the fly gets used and used, the more the fish are going to see of that red underbody. Okay, so now we've wrapped the polar chenille up to the legs, go past the rubber legs on the underside, come back over the top and retrace the steps of that X with the polar chenille. Okay, so now we've got an X of that right on top. We're going to make a few more wraps right in front and tie this off right on the top. Okay. So now we're starting to look like a nice baitfish pattern. Once again, we are going to trim this down, and when trimming this, we got to make sure we get all these rubber legs. You know, they need to be moving clearly without the polar chenille inhibiting their movement. So we're going to trim it down so they stick out, and I've kind of parted these to each side. And okay, so we're going to trim it down, and we don't want any of them to necessarily be full length. You can leave a couple of the long ones in the back if you want. I still try to trim them down so they don't get messed up with the marabou. One of the big upsides you'll find to fishing a fly like this, where you've got a front hook, a jointed fly, front hook, nothing in the back, is you virtually never foul. In fact, about the only time you do foul is if you have a fish strike it and you either miss the fish or the fly gets kind of fouled in its mouth. That's about it. So that's nice. So you don't come up to your favorite spot after you made a bunch of really good casts. A wind gust hits you at the back cast, you throw a tailing loop and the fly fouls, and all of a sudden you don't get to fish it. You know, that helps a lot. You can't catch one if your fly's not in the water. Now we've got, you know, basically the full skeleton of the fly. Now we're just going to add the eyelashes here, which we pulled that tip of the marabou feather aside earlier for a reason. And with this, when we tie it in, this is a little tricky, so pay close attention here. We're going to get the vise flipped over so that it's hook point up in the vise. And when we eye this out, you can see I want the marabou to be, let's say, a 1/2 inch longer than the rubber legs total. That's where I want to cut it at. So I'm going to pinch with my vise hand, cut that marabou tip clean there. And we're going to lay it right on top of the hook on the far side. Make a couple wraps so you can see it's tied in on that side of the hook, going backwards. From here we're going to flip it down and around the dumbbell and secure right to the side, right in front of that rubber leg. Okay, so we'll do that one more time. So if I undo the wraps, and if I was to get a measurement off, it's really easy to fix. I just undo the wraps, it pops back up. And if I wanted to make it a little shorter, I could wrap back. That would take a little bit off. This one was cut to a good length, so we're going to hold it up, flip down around the dumbbell, and secure it right to the side there. That's important, right in front of the dumbbell, or right in front of the rubber legs. So you can see how they're kind of basically been tied in at the same spot now. Okay, and we're going to mirror what we just did for this other side. I try to do it on the far side first. It's the trickier side, and then at this point it's all downhill, and we're going to do the same thing. We've cut our marabou tip out of there, secure it to the tire side of the hook right on the top there, a couple wraps, flip down and around. Okay, so that one, that's a little long, so here's the quick deal here. If you cut it too short, you can't fix it, but I've cut it a little long, so I'm going to pull my stuff back and wrap back on it a little bit. And this should even out the length really nicely. And I want these feathers to be just a skosh longer than the rubber legs. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to clean up our thread base here. Now we're starting to look like a fly. And once again, UV red ice dab. Get a nice good cord of it going here, and we're going to cover up that whole thread base behind the dumbbells, starting at the back. And right behind the dumbbells, once you've made it up there and we've got a good coverage here, we're going to throw a half hitch, notch it behind there, get it nice and tight, glue, and we are going to basically make a super glue eyebrow here and smother that whole top part. Okay, leave a little tag end. Alright, now we get the fun of popping these babies apart. Okay, so fundamentals of it are done, ready to go. Last thing I'll do before we start really drying is check the dumbbells. They're a little askew. They look good though. And boom, we've got a size 4 Smoken mirrors, Orowe Plata, really designed to look like a little whitefish or a little cutthroat. Most streams in Montana, in fact in the west, have one or both of these, and most anglers at some point have caught a big brown with a little whitey in its mouth or a little cutty or whatever it is. So we know that they are a forage fish, and especially with high water years, which is what we're looking at, we should at least have an average to high water year, which means whitefish are going to be at a more of a disadvantage this spring with higher water coming down, and you know big browns are going to be looking for them. And definitely a fun color to fish in off-color water, where you would typically automatically think about throwing a black or an olive or something like that. This is a great one to throw in there, and it has caught some really, really big fish for me over the years.